Welcome back to the deep dive. Ever feel like you're banging your head against the wall staring at your code?
Yeah.
Like it's written in some ancient language only your computer understands?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's Coder's Block, and it's the deep dive topic du jour.
It is.
We've got a ton of interesting material from you all on this, and thankfully, it's not just power through it advice,
No.
right?
No, not at all. It's deeper than that.
We're going to look at mental strategies, practical coding tips,
Right.
not just to get you past those blocks, but maybe even come out the other side actually, liking to code more.
Exactly.
Because who wants to fight with their computer all day long?
It shouldn't feel like a fight. Right.
Right.
What I find really interesting in all this is like the psychology of coding.
Okay.
Our sources all point to Coder's Block as like this mental state.
Interesting.
Not a lack of skill, right? It's not that you don't know how to code. It's just you hit this wall and the progress just stops.
It just sucks.
And it happens to everyone.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I can't tell you how many times I've been there myself. I literally once spent like an entire day wrestling with this bug. Turns out I just misspelled a variable name.
I've been there.
You know, it's always something like that. It's always the simplest things, but our brains, they get so fixated on the complex stuff that we miss those tiny little details.
It's so true. And actually, I think that highlights something really important from what we're looking at. It even happens to like the seasoned, pro developers.
Yeah, all the time.
This isn't about being good at coding or bad at coding.
Yeah.
It's literally how our brains work.
It's a human thing.
So first off, like knowing you're not alone in this,
Yeah.
huge.
Huge.
Now, some of the common causes that we saw pop up, everything from like, the project scope is completely unclear to that feeling of I'm drowning in complexity,
Yeah.
all the way down to just plain old burnout.
Yep. It's like anything else,
Yeah.
you know. You can get burned out if you're not careful.
Absolutely. Did any of those resonate with you? I mean, like, I know I've certainly hit all of those at some point.
I mean, it's like staring at a mountain of laundry, You just sometimes like knowing where to start is the hardest part.
It really is.
But once you identify the source of that block, you're already kind of like on the path to overcoming it, you know?
Yeah, you're starting to break it down.
Exactly.
So let's talk strategy then, because I think a lot of times we try to just like brute force our way through these coding blocks.
Right.
But what if I told you that a little mental agility could actually be way more effective?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where it gets really interesting, I think. A lot of the material that we're looking at stresses this like big picture approach.
Okay.
So like before you even write a single line of code, do you like truly deeply understand the problem that you're actually trying to solve?
Well, that's a good question.
Think of it like planning like a cross-country road trip. You wouldn't just hop in the car and start driving without like a destination and at least a rough idea of like the route you're going to take.
Oh, no way. I would be so lost.
Right.
I would be lost within like 5 miles. Probably.
Exactly.
I have made that mistake in coding, though. I will say that.
Sure.
Like diving into the code before I have a clear plan.
Yeah.
And it is just a recipe for spaghetti code disaster.
Exactly. And that's also where breaking down these complex tasks into smaller, more manageable steps becomes really, really key.
Right.
Another thing that these sources talk about is identifying knowledge gaps early on. Like if you need to brush up on a specific concept or a particular tool, do that before you even write a single line of code. It'll save you so much headache later.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Work smarter, not harder.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's what that's all about. Now, this is where it gets interesting to me. So some of the sources are talking about some less obvious strategies,
Okay.
things like changing your environment
Yeah. Yeah.
and even mindfulness.
Interesting.
Like, how does that fit into coding?
Yeah, I know. It sounds a little strange, but our brains actually thrive on novelty. One of the sources even recommends like temporarily relocating your workspace. So like go to a coffee shop, go to a library, even just like a different room in your house.
Yeah.
That change of scenery can do wonders for like your creative problem solving.
It's like hitting the reset button.
Exactly.
I find that like I will literally like start pacing around my desk when I'm really stuck on something. It's like my body knows I need to get out of my head for a minute.
Exactly. And speaking of getting out of your head, a lot of the sources talk about mindfulness. And don't worry, this is not about, becoming a meditation guru or anything like that. But even just taking a few minutes to do some focused breathing can significantly reduce your stress hormones. And we all know stress hormones they can completely derail our focus.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So coding meditation, is that a thing now?
You know,
I have to admit, I was a little skeptical when I saw this in the research.
I get it.
But there's actual science behind this.
There is. There really is. It's not, it's not mystical or anything. It's really about training your brain to be more present, more focused in that moment.
Okay.
And that kind of focus, when you're dealing with, the intricacies of code, it's invaluable.
It's huge. Now let's talk about a technique that maybe a few more people have heard of. The Pomodoro technique.
Yeah.
Are you familiar?
Very familiar.
Yeah. Big fan.
Big fan.
I mean, it's like interval training, but for your brain. Right.
Exactly. Exactly. So 25 minutes of focused work followed by a 5-minute break. And the reason it works so well, particularly for coding, is that it kind of aligns with our natural ultradian rhythms.
Okay.
So our brains are actually wired for these cycles of like focused attention and then more diffused thinking.
Interesting.
It's not about like pushing through until you burn out. It's about working with your brain's like natural tendencies.
I can back that up. Like when I hit that like afternoon slump,
Yeah.
instead of just trying to power through, if I just set a Pomodoro timer,
Yes.
it's amazing how much more productive those little short bursts of focus can actually be.
It makes a huge difference, and sometimes the best solution is the simplest one, and that's just talking it out.
Okay.
Do you ever heard of rubber duck debugging?
The name? I love it already.
That's a good one, right?
But yeah, I've totally been there, like explaining my code out loud, even if there's literally no one around.
Yeah.
It's like, I need to hear myself say it sometimes.
You're not alone. There's actually science behind this, too. Yeah, when you articulate your thought process, even to an inanimate object, it forces your brain to slow down,
Okay.
to really organize its thoughts. And often, that's all it takes to kind of like pinpoint where the issue is.
It's like you're turning code into plain English.
Exactly.
And then suddenly all those hidden assumptions you're making, or maybe like little logical flaws, they become obvious.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Speaking of fresh perspectives, all the sources we looked at, they emphasize the importance of seeking inspiration from others. And I want to be clear, it's not about copying code.
Right.
It's about understanding different approaches to a problem.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, honestly, we live in a golden age of being able to do that,
We really do.
especially in the coding community. I mean, think about it. Sites like Stack Overflow, GitHub,
Invaluable.
invaluable.
Yeah?
I can't count the number of times I've gotten unstuck thanks to other coders just,
Sharing their knowledge.
sharing their knowledge.
It's a beautiful example of like collective problem solving.
It's a reminder that we're not alone in this, We're all kind of in this together.
We're all in this together. So we talked about the mental game of coding.
Right.
But what about those times you need to get your hands dirty with some actual code?
Yeah, absolutely. That's where these practical tips come in. And, one of the most powerful concepts that we saw come up again and again in the research is this idea of starting with a minimum viable product, or MVP.
MVP sounds kind of fancy, but what does it actually mean in the coding world?
It's simpler than it sounds.
Yeah.
So basically, instead of like aiming for the most elegant, feature-rich solution right out of the gate, you focus on just building the simplest possible version that actually, works.
Okay.
One of the sources had this great analogy. Imagine you're building a car, right?
Okay.
With an MVP approach, you wouldn't start with like heated seats and a fancy sound system.
Right.
You start with an engine, wheels, something to steer with, just the bare minimum to actually get that car moving. So instead of getting lost in the weeds, trying to perfect every little detail, you're getting something functional up and running as quickly as possible. I like it.
Build momentum.
Yeah.
Overcome that initial hurdle of inertia.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, so what other kind of practical tips did we see?
Let's talk about console.log.
Okay.
Now, I know this might seem super basic.
Yeah.
But honestly, I underestimated the power of this for years.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Console.log, you mean like the thing I used to just print messages to the console? Like, how can something that simple be that powerful?
It's more than just printing messages. Think of console.log as like your coding detective partner.
Okay.
Right. By strategically placing these console.log statements throughout your code, you can actually trace the flow of your program. You can inspect the values of variables at different stages. It's like setting up a series of checkpoints to see exactly what's happening behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. One of our sources had this great example. Let's say you're trying to figure out why a loop isn't working correctly.
Right.
By adding these console.log statements inside the loop, you can see how the variables are changing with each iteration. And that can help you pinpoint the issue so much faster.
It's like having X-ray vision into your code.
Exactly.
I never thought about it that way.
Now, our source material also mentions version control.
Yes.
And I'll be honest, Git still makes me a little nervous sometimes.
I get it. Git can seem intimidating at first,
Yeah.
but trust me, it is a game changer.
Okay.
It basically allows you to create these save points in your code.
Okay.
So you can experiment freely without the fear of breaking everything.
Right.
You can try different approaches, and if things go wrong, you can always just revert back to a working version.
Yeah.
One of the sources compared it to having a time machine for your code.
Okay.
And honestly, that's a pretty accurate description.
A time machine for code. Sign me up. Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
No more fear of making a change and then spending like 3 hours trying to undo it.
Exactly. Speaking of fear reduction, another really helpful concept from the research is test-driven development, or TDD.
TDD. That sounds pretty, I don't know, advanced. Is that something I need to worry about as like a newer coder?
It might sound intimidating, but the core idea is actually quite simple. So in TDD, you're essentially writing tests for your code before you actually write the code itself.
So you're defining what success looks like up front.
Precisely. You're creating a set of criteria that your code needs to meet.
Okay.
And this has a bunch of benefits. For one, it forces you to really think through the problem and all of its potential edge cases, before you even start coding.
Right.
Plus, it gives you this really clear measure of progress as you're building. So as you write your code, you can run your tests and you can see if you're actually moving in the right direction.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's less about already being a coding expert and more about really clearly defining the problem and then having a way to check if you're solving it correctly as you go.
Exactly. And beyond these kind of core concepts, we're also really lucky to live in a time where we have this incredible array of tools and resources at our disposal.
Oh, absolutely. And our source material touched on this, like the rise of AI in coding.
Yeah.
I feel like there are new AI-powered tools popping up every day.
It's true. We're seeing this huge surge in AI-assisted code completion tools.
Yeah.
Things like GitHub Copilot that use machine learning to actually suggest code snippets based on the context of what you're working on.
It's like having an incredibly smart coding buddy, like looking over your shoulder,
Right.
offering suggestions and helping you, write code faster and all that.
Exactly. But it is crucial to remember that these tools, they're meant to assist, not replace human thinking.
Right.
You still need to understand the code that you're writing and make sure that it's doing what you intend it to do.
Right. We don't want to become so reliant on the AI that we forget how to think for ourselves completely.
Exactly. And beyond AI, there are countless other resources too. Interactive learning platforms, code analysis tools, online communities.
So many.
The list goes on and on. The point is, we're not alone in this.
It's like we have this whole support system for coding,
We do.
which makes sense when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
Because the source material actually made this point that really stuck with me. Coding isn't just about the technical skills, right?
It's not.
It's about building resilience.
It really is. That's such a key takeaway from all of this. It's about developing that ability to bounce back from challenges, to see those setbacks as learning opportunities, not failures.
Right.
And one of the most effective ways to do that is through continuous learning.
It's like that saying, programming's a marathon, not a sprint.
That's a good one.
Because the tech landscape changes so fast.
So fast.
If you're not constantly learning, adapting, it does feel like you get left behind.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Whether it's diving into a new language or exploring a new framework or even just staying updated on industry trends and stuff.
Yeah.
That ongoing learning keeps your skills sharp and keeps your mind flexible.
And it goes back to that growth mindset that we saw in some of the research, right?
Yes.
Seeing challenges as opportunities for growth, not these insurmountable roadblocks.
Exactly. And another really powerful tool for resilience that I think often gets overlooked is the power of community.
Oh, for sure.
You know?
Having that network of other coders to
Yeah.
share frustrations with.
Yeah.
Brainstorm solutions.
Celebrate victories.
Oh, yeah. Celebrate victories. Huge.
I don't know what I would do without my coding buddies.
Oh, same.
Seriously.
Yeah, it's so important.
It's a good reminder that we're all in this together. And there's something really incredible about seeing a problem from a fresh perspective. And often that's all it takes to kind of unlock that breakthrough solution.
Right.
So, join those coding meetups, participate in online forums, find a mentor, become a mentor.
Yeah,
Sharing that knowledge and experience, it's incredibly empowering.
for sure. And amidst all this,
Yeah.
the learning and the coding and the problem solving, the sources also stress the importance of just taking care of yourself.
Oh, yeah. That's huge.
Right.
Yeah.
Like get some sleep,
Sleep is important.
exercise,
Mm.
manage your stress. It sounds so obvious,
It does.
but I think it's really easy to neglect those things when you are like laser focused on a project.
It is. It is. It's easy to forget that, our brains need downtime too in order to function at their best,
They do.
And when you're well rested and you're energized and you're, less stressed out, those coding challenges just seem less daunting.
It's true. Sometimes a good night's sleep is the best debugging tool there is.
Truth.
And you know what else the sources mentioned? Celebrating our successes.
Oh, yes.
Right.
That's so important. It's easy to get caught up in this endless cycle of bug fixing and, feature building. We forget to acknowledge how far we've come.
I am so guilty of that.
Right.
I'm already on to the next challenge. I forget to appreciate the problems I've already solved.
That's why it's so crucial to take the time to really reflect on your progress,
Yeah.
to acknowledge those aha moments, those victories, big or small. Not only does it boost your confidence, it also serves as this really powerful reminder of your growth as a coder.
That's a great point. So what does this all boil down to?
Conquering coder's block, it's not just about memorizing syntax or mastering some specific framework. It's really about cultivating that resilient mindset, embracing that continuous learning, and building that supportive community around you.
And maybe most importantly, not being afraid to ask for help when you need it.
Absolutely. We've all been there, staring at that screen full of code, thinking what have I gotten myself into?
Oh, yeah.
But the journey of coding is all about embracing those challenges, learning from our mistakes, and really celebrating those aha moments along the way,
It is. Yeah.
So the next time you hit that wall of frustration, just remember, you're not alone. Take a deep breath, try out some of these strategies, and most importantly, have fun.
Yes.
That's what it's all about.
That's what coding is all about.
Now, one of the sources actually left us with a question I'd love for you to all to ponder. Think about the last time you felt really, truly stuck coding.
Okay.
Which of these strategies we've talked about today do you think would have helped you the most in that moment?
It's a great question to reflect on. And on that note, this has been another deep dive. We'll catch you next time.